Jayne Schoenfeld today in the Carpool Conversations. She's going to tell us her drink of choice and why she chose it.
Today I got a fresh, crispy Diet Coke. Um, I feel like I grew up on Diet Coke. My dad is, I would use the word obsessed with Diet Coke,
Really?
and we had it growing up our whole lives. So it was kind of in our fridge, and so I got used to it, and now it's also my drink of choice.
Yes, very nice.
And
Is
you
that
got one too?
I get the exact same thing everybody else
Oh,
gets
that's
too.
fun.
So
I
I'm
love
getting a
that.
ton of different drinks. Man, I realized I am addicted to soda. Like I'm
Oh my
craving
gosh.
these type of these type of drives. Like, oh, what am I gonna get?
I know. Gustav and I have been on a soda kick, and we're trying to ease
Oof,
off of it. So
this is so
I'm slowly
dangerous.
getting used to not having it.
I know. All right, well, let's talk about now. This can be like high school you or like previous years. When I say like high school Jane, you can talk. You can think of, I guess, think back on really any age when you were younger.
Okay.
So let's first talk about what high school you went to and what year you graduated.
Okay, I went to Highland High School in Gilbert, Arizona. I
Arizona,
graduated 2016, coming
2016.
up on my 10 year.
Oh my goodness,
I
are
know.
you gonna go to? Is there like some
I
big
think I'll
reunion going
go.
on?
Yeah, I think I'll go. I haven't heard
That's
anything about it yet, but I think I'll go.
that's
It'd
cool.
be fun to go see people. I feel like I had a good high school experience and I had a lot of fun friends that I'd love to
Oh,
see.
reconnect with.
Yeah.
Stay in touch. Do you still stay in touch with a lot of friends from high school, or at least some people?
Yes, I have like a close friend group that I still hang out with. Like whenever I go home to Arizona,
Those are your go-to
yeah,
people.
I see there's like a handful of them that I see every time I go. And then, yeah, there's others that I still am connected with, but I don't see them as much, just on occasion.
Nice. And that would most likely be in Arizona, so there'd be a trip, drive over to Arizona or fly
Yeah,
over to Arizona.
fly. I can't do any more drives.
No, driving to Arizona is so
It's too
tough.
long,
Oh my
especially
gosh.
with two kids now. It's
Oh
too
my
much to
gosh.
drive.
Yeah. How does Lily generally do in the car?
I feel like she's better now that she's older.
Understands a little better.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just hard for them to be stuck in one spot for 10
Nine, ten
hours.
hours. Oh, that's
Yeah, our
painful.
trip to California was supposed to be 10 hours and we made it a 16-hour drive.
Oh my gosh.
So, so we're
The
tripped out.
stops and the
Yeah.
yeah, too much. Yeah, not a fan of that. So let's go back to high school Jane,
Okay.
2016, years prior to that. When you were in high school, when you were growing up, what did you want to be? Was there anything specific that you're like, I'm really drawn to this?
I feel like I didn't, career wise, I didn't figure out what I wanted to do until college,
Okay.
but it's always been my dream just to be a mom. And even though it sounds cliche, it's like I felt like I was always drawn to kids and meant to be a mom.
Really?
Yeah, I was an aunt when I was 4. So
Oh, whoa. So you started young.
yeah, I started young and I loved my nieces and nephews. Like my first email account was Auntie Jane at gmail.com.
you were you were just ready for it.
Yeah, I
Just
was
ready
ready
for
for it.
kids
I've
and
always
stuff.
loved kids. So I feel like that was my dream. But career wise, I didn't figure it out until college. And I feel like college was a huge pivotal moment for me where I kind of figured out who I was and what I wanted to be just because I was on my own, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Tell me more about that. That's always interesting because it's
Okay.
you grew up your whole life and you're really trying to figure out who you are. You have your siblings' influence, you have your parents' influence,
Yeah.
and you're saying now that you're by yourself, it's like now I figured that out. So tell me how that process worked.
So I feel like after high school, I mean, high school is just you're having fun, you're having friends, just living life. Whereas in college, it's like I moved from Arizona, obviously, to Utah, and I didn't really have any friends here.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I just had a family friend that was like, "Hey, we have an apartment if you want to move in." So I did, and I moved in to Provo, just literally across the street of where
Oh,
our house right
really?
now. Yeah, that big complex.
That's where you live?
Yeah.
Oh, I
So
have
I
no
moved
idea.
there, and I just kind of had to figure it out on my own where I had like a safety cushion of my sisters who lived around, but I was in school and I was busy and they had their families.
Mm-hmm.
So it quite literally felt like I was on my own trying to figure it out. So I was kind of thrown into like, okay, what do I believe? What do I want to do with my life?
Yeah,
Who am I?
some big questions.
Yeah, just because it's like you're taken away from your family who is, who you are as a core when you're growing up. Your childhood is like your family. And it's such a big part of your life when you're growing up. But
Yeah.
then when you're on your own, you're like, "Oh, maybe I don't resonate with some of the things my family does. I have to learn how to bake a potato. I have to go buy my
Was
own toilet paper." You know, it's just like figuring
yeah,
out
yeah.
life on your own. You're
The
like,
potato
"Okay."
thing, is that thing does that some significance in your life? Did you
Oh, yeah.
struggle?
Well, I was just like, "Oh, I don't know how to cook anything." Like,
Got
I
some
just didn't.
cereal, mac and cheese, just simple
Exactly.
stuff, right?
Yeah, I would do all
Okay.
that, and then I eventually was like, "I need to eat more healthy other than freezer meals, microwavable meals."
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like it was a big moment for me to be like, "Okay, I'm learning how to do it on my own," you know?
Mm, big learning curve too, I'm
Yeah,
sure, right?
right.
When do you think you got a pretty good grip of, okay, you know what, I'm doing pretty good on my own. I got this.
I think the second semester of college, I was like, "Okay, I'm getting the swing of things. I understand what college is about." And I was kind of learning my own interests for the first time
Uh-huh.
that was outside of my family unit, you know?
Hmm.
And so I went to UVU and I just did my general electives. And that's kind of how I figured out my love for psychology.
Psychology,
Yeah.
okay.
So I got my associate's degree in psychology and it was my favorite thing. I hated school in high school, but in college I fell in love with the learning process and putting my energy and hard work into something and seeing it on the other side of like grades and just the knowledge
Hmm.
that I could gain from it. So that,
You saw a benefit from it,
yeah,
right? It wasn't just go to school, go to writing class, and
yeah, because I always
write an essay.
struggled like focusing in high school and I got good grades, but it was kind of just like I was just breezing by, you know?
Hmm.
I didn't care about the learning aspect, it was just a social aspect
Oh
in high
yeah,
school.
yeah.
And then college, I just took all my electives and I think it was like general psychology, the first class I took for my like general electives.
Is that what got you hooked?
Oh yeah. I was like, this is the coolest thing. I felt so drawn to it just because you're learning about, in a sense, you're learning about yourself and how you think and how others around you think.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can go into depth of like how the brain works and how social aspects work and relationships, you know, all of the little things in life that you kind of just don't think about,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
exactly. Do you think that those classes in psychology played a part in you figuring out who you were? Like, did that help?
Yes and no. I feel like I learned who I was just by experimenting in a sense,
Okay, yeah.
but I do feel like I was able to realize of the ideas of how I thought and you know the way you grow up has an influence on how you think today, you know, things like that. But it played probably the biggest role now in my life as a parent.
I
I
was just
took
gonna ask you that, how that
Yeah, I
translates
took a
over.
class. It was what was it called? Childhood development
Okay.
or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And it was my favorite class that I took in psychology, the psychology world.
Hmm.
And it just taught me a lot of like the developmental stages of children and relationships with your kids and how it can affect their life.
Wow. So it really dove deep into
Yeah, it was
just childhood and the upbringing, right?
yeah, it was way more specific and I still have like my my books, what are they called? My textbooks from
You still have
college,
them?
and I'll like browse through them. If I'm having like a hard time with Lily, I'll be like, okay, I'm
Okay, what
just
is
gonna
this book?
refer back to what I
That's
learned.
your manual, your
Yeah,
guidebook.
yeah,
Oh, that's
because
cool.
as parents, you're always wanting to be the best version of yourself as you can be for your child.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So
sense.
it was very helpful becoming a parent.
So I'm curious. Okay, so you growing up, you were around kids, you had nieces
Hmm.
and nephews, you're just like, I love kids.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say this lightly because I'm not saying that you don't like kids now that you have children, right? They're
Hmm.
difficult for sure. But the can you tell me about how different the dream of having kids was versus how it is now actually having kids?
That's a good question. Okay, so I feel like growing up with my nieces and nephews, you kind of saw the easiest version. You obviously saw your siblings like struggling as
Yeah,
parents, but
yeah,
they would like drop off the kids and you'd have fun and they'd go home, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly.
Like you don't have
You're
to
like
put
the
them to bed.
grandparent, yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like having kids now, you see different versions of yourself than you pictured in a sense. Like, I'm sure you get this of you picture yourself as like the patient parent that is always accepting of your kids, and
Yeah.
you're the gentle parent, you're always calm and collected. Whereas I feel like kids just kind of know how, especially your kids, they know how to push your specific
Oh
buttons,
man, it's
and they're
unreal.
kind of manipulative.
Yeah.
But I feel like overall, so far, I should say, it's been easy and difficult in the same time.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy because it's your specific child, not your nephew or niece. Like, you
Hmm.
understand your kid better than you would understand your nephew or niece.
That you don't see as often,
Yeah,
right?
you know their triggers, their naughty habits, you know them in a deeper level than you would with your niece or nephew. So in that sense, it's easier to hone in on their specific needs.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's obviously personalized, and you probably see a lot of yourself or maybe a lot of your spouse, a lot of Gustav in your kids, and so you can catch
Yeah.
that on quickly. It's like, oh man,
Right.
I remember I used to do that when I was a kid,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so you know how to handle that better. I did
Uh-huh.
that a lot with Ray, because Ray is very to herself. Not that she's
Uh-huh.
naturally quiet, but when she's around the right people or the people she actually wants to talk to, then she just opens right up. And I was
Right.
like, I was just like that as a kid.
Yeah. Like she needs her comfort
Hmm.
first and then she can explore.
Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right. So now that you do have kids, you have two.
Mhm.
How's the transition from one to two? Was that? I know the second one's still pretty young, but
Yeah.
how's that been?
I feel like I thought it was going to be really, really hard, but I actually, in my experience, 0 to 1 was harder than 1 to 2. Like
Okay.
zero
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
like no kids to one kid was harder than 1 kid to 2, just because before you have kids, it's just you and your spouse.
Yeah.
And then once you have a kid, you kind of have to figure it out of adding another person in your little bubble, and they have a lot of needs, and there's a lot of things that you don't know how to do, like sleep training and things like that.
Oh
Whereas
man.
with
Yeah.
your second kid, they join your family and you're like, "Okay, I've had a baby before. I understand what they need. I know what this looks like."
Yeah.
It's just incorporating a second routine into your life.
Hmm.
Um,
Got the hang of it.
instead of like going from zero routine to all of a sudden I have one baby that I am in charge of, and I have to unload and load the car seat anytime I go somewhere. It was a
Everywhere.
huge
Yeah.
adjustment for me going from no kids to having my first.
Oh
Just
man.
going and doing things was the hardest
Just
thing.
anything, something so simple. Hey, I'm gonna
Yeah.
go pick something up at the store.
Yeah, like, "I'm gonna go run and get a drink." Like, before, it'd just be like, "Hop in the car and go."
Hmm.
Whereas now it's like, "Okay, I have to make sure I have a change of diapers, I have a change of clothes, I have to load her in her car seat, I have to unload her in the car seat, go get the drink, load her back in." It's just a whole different
Oh
process
man.
than just hopping in and
And
going.
just going, right?
Yeah.
Exactly right. It's funny because Heather and I talk about that all the time. Where it's like, oh man, three kids is crazy. I can't even imagine how life was with just us two and how
Yeah.
simple it was. Even with just one, it's like
Mhm.
how easy it was. And now we got to take care of three, and we've got naps.
Yeah.
But the at the end of the day, it's so fulfilling and so enriching to
Yeah.
have kids and just raise those kids and just really start teaching them the values. As they get older, they're gonna really start grasping those values, right?
Yeah.
When they're a little bit younger, they're wild, they've got a lot of energy. That's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like the
Different stages.
selfless aspect makes you grow yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good way to put that. Is that
Gustav and I always say this, like, with whatever life throws at us, you stretch and grow.
yeah,
Like, you go from not being married to married, you stretch and grow. And then that's your new,
you figure it out.
yeah, that's your new baseline. And then when you have a new kid, you stretch and grow, and that's your new baseline.
Mhm.
You're just adding constantly and becoming a better version of yourself by being selfless
That's a
and
really
caring
good way
for
to put that.
others.
Is that did that come from your psychology books?
No, just my brain.
Just from you after studying psychology, going
Yeah.
to school and stuff.
Yeah.
So okay, so going back to college, so you did graduate. Is there a plan in the near future, maybe down the road, that you're going to use this degree, or you're going to get into some psychology job or something, or what's the plan with that?
That's my hope. So when I was in college, this is when Gustav and I were dating. I got my associates. we got married and I was still going to school, but COVID happened.
Yeah.
And so I withdrew from my classes because there was that option of no penalty, you can withdraw from your classes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I did that because it was in the heat of like, we don't know what this does to people. We don't know the effects of it. You know,
Hmm.
it was like right when it first started happening.
Hmm.
So I withdrew from my classes, and my plan was to always go back um, to finish my degree because I wanted to eventually like go get my master's, but it kind of got derailed by COVID. And then once COVID settled down, I actually went back to school
Oh,
and I was in classes and I got pregnant with
with
my first
yeah,
kid with
yeah.
Lily, which was, I mean, I say this like in the best way possible. She was a happy, unplanned surprise. And so that kind of derailed it
Yeah.
a second time. And then once you have a kid, it's just like you don't really have
Oof.
time for big things for
Oh
yourself.
yeah.
You know, you make time to go to the gym or to go on a walk by yourself just to have some mental
The needed alone time
some
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
some mental breaks.
Yeah.
But going to school and taking 12 credits would be nearly impossible without a lot of help.
Full
Yeah.
time mom with two kids.
Yeah, because it's like you have a village, but like my mom was in Arizona and like Macrina was working full time.
Hmm.
So I didn't have anyone to just be like, hey, can you watch Lily for a few hours while I'm in school?
Hmm.
And my sisters had their kids, you know.
Yeah. So
So
it
it's
gets a
just
little bit more
different.
difficult.
Yeah, it was more difficult. So my end goal still to this day is I would love to get my master's. And my dream actually would be to be a professor.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
I
I'd
didn't know
love to
that.
be a
That's awesome.
psychology professor just because I feel like they were all so amazing and understanding, and they just were like happy people because they loved what they were doing, you
Hmm.
know?
That really left an impact on you then.
Yeah, and I was just like, "Oh man, I would love to just be surrounded by all of these young minds that are just learning and growing and in the
Hmm.
most like pivotal point in their life, you know, where they're
Yeah.
figuring it all out and just teaching them, you know, it's just like I would love to do it. It
That's
would just be
amazing.
my dream. Yeah.
That is amazing. I think that's an awesome dream.
But that's down the line. Once
Down the
my
road,
kids
kids
are
are
grown, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, maybe empty nester. Anyways, at some point, it sounds like long term
Yeah.
goal. That's what you want to do, which I think
And
sounds amazing.
yeah, and I most likely will be a younger empty nester just because I had my first kid at 24.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So a little
I
bit younger, which
yeah,
is
and depending on how
good.
many kids we have, like we could be done now, we could be done in 2 years from now, you know, and then
Pretty soon then. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So it's
actually
like a
pretty
different
fast.
yeah, so it's like a different aspect of life that will be coming up soon. I'm like, "Oh, we're going to be
That
it'll be
younger,
soon."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is nice because Heather and I had conversations like that too, and it was always, do we start now having kids? We're just gonna be a little bit younger, but
Yeah. You'll be done
we'll be
when you're
done. Yeah,
younger.
exactly. So then we'll have the energy. We'll be grandparents or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like we'll
Yeah.
just kind of start younger, which I actually like the idea of.
Yeah, and I feel like going back to my family upbringing, it kind of did have an impact on me with the age gap between me and my siblings and my parents. My mom was turning 42 when she had me.
Oh
So
wow, I
she
didn't know
was,
that.
yeah, so she was older
Yeah,
and we still had a great relationship even though she was older.
yeah.
But I do feel like being younger, you have just different freedoms, you know, like you said, like you'll be young and healthy to go on trips with your spouse,
Hmm.
or you'll be a young grandparent where you can run around, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
It's just
Actually play with
different.
grandkids and
Yeah.
stuff.
And I want the closest relationship with my kids as I can. And I feel like, in a sense, growing with them
Yeah,
will help do that just because you're not set in your ways. You're just kind of like
you're still
figuring it
learning as you
out.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Tell me, okay, so I didn't realize how young you are in the family. What? So how many siblings do you have, and then what's the age gaps between all of you? Between I guess the oldest and you, the
So
youngest.
I'm number 7 of 7. And like I said, my mom was older when she had me, but she was, I believe she was 21 when she had my oldest sister.
Oh, so she
So
started young too.
yeah, she
Younger.
started younger too.
Yeah.
And my sister and my oldest sister, um, she's actually 20 years older than I am.
20 years.
Yeah. So
Wow.
my sister and my mom are almost the same age gap as me and my sister.
That's
I
crazy. I
know.
didn't
So
know
I
that.
could be my sister's child.
Oh my gosh.
So that's why my nephew is so close in age to me, is because
How old is your nephew?
that's a good question. So how old am I? I'm 26, so he's 20.
He's in
What's
his
20?
20s.
He's 22.
Oh my
He
gosh,
just
a
got
full year
married.
difference.
Yeah, he got married
Wow.
last year. Yeah, last spring. So it's almost been a year-ish.
Wow. Wow, wow,
Hmm.
wow. Okay, so yeah, you really could be your oldest sister's daughter.
Yeah,
You'd be the oldest of the group.
yeah. And I could be having a kid in 2 years with my nephew. I mean, he could be having
Yeah,
a
yeah,
kid at the same time
yeah.
as I would be having a kid.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll edit that out.
I
I'm
won't be
just
having a
kidding.
kid with nephew.
That is crazy. She could be a grandma, and
Yeah,
oh my gosh, that's wild.
I know. It's fun though. I love our family dynamic just because we all are still so close, even though there's big age gaps.
Yeah.
Like obviously there's seven of us, so there's a lot in between. But my sister that's closest in age to me is 8 years older than me.
Okay.
So
So still a pretty big
yeah,
difference.
still a big age difference, but we got married at the same time. We had our first baby at the same time. We had our second baby at the same time.
Oh,
So
really?
we're on
Oh,
the
I didn't know
same
that.
life path, like parallel lines.
Yeah, yeah.
So that brings us closer, even though there is an age gap.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm just really close with her because we're going through the same things at the same time.
That's really cool. I saw this meme the other day, and it was kind of along these lines where it's like you're for years you're living with this sibling, this random person who was just born, and they're your brother, your sister,
Yeah,
and you're fighting all the time, arguing all the time. And all of a sudden, there's just a time where it just clicks, and you're like, I kind of like this guy, I
yeah.
kind of like this
You
girl.
kind of get me, and I kind of get you.
Yeah, yeah. So then it's funny because at least I think it eventually happens for everybody, right?
Yeah,
Obviously with my siblings, and I'm sure you had your little tiffs with your siblings, but just there's a
yeah,
point where you get older and just realize like, we kind of like each
yeah.
other, and then
No,
become best friends.
it was a different. I feel like my childhood was very different than most people's because I was so much younger than my siblings
Yeah.
that when I was in sixth grade, it was just me. Like I say, like I'm a only child with siblings because when I was in
Oh
sixth
wow.
grade, nobody else was home. My sister closest in age to me went off to college when I was
You were
in
by
sixth grade. I was
yourself.
by
Wow.
myself.
So you really that's the
So it's just
perfect way to put that.
yeah, so it's just me and my parents. And so in a sense is like I got a lot of like attention from my parents in good and bad ways just because I was the only one home.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a
It
lot of
was very
sense.
different than most people where they have siblings all around them. Like I feel like we had sibling tiffs because I was 8 when my sister was 16, just completely different life
Oh yeah,
phases. But that
very
was the
different
only time
stages.
like we had little tiffs in my siblings was just because I was just the annoying little sister.
Always been the little sister,
Yeah.
which is fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Because you had a bigger family, 7 siblings isn't, I don't think that's a small family.
No, it's huge.
How did that influence you with the amount of kids you want to have? Did that lean you more towards, I want to have a lot of kids, or let's keep it small?
I I don't necessarily feel like it had a huge effect on me because I had such a different experience than most people do. I love having a ton of siblings now just because it's fun to get together. It's like a
Yeah.
giant party when you all get together
Hmm.
and the kids play and it's just a fun time. I feel like what affected my decision to have my amount of kids was just becoming an actual parent.
Yeah, and seeing how it
Yeah,
actually
and seeing
worked out.
how like the difficulties of it, you think
Yeah.
it's easier in your mind than it actually is in person,
Yeah.
actually happening.
Yeah, I get
So I feel like that was what affected me being like, okay, I probably don't want 7 kids.
I
That's a
don't know.
lot of kids.
I props to our parents
I know.
because they didn't have access to iPads to nearly half the things that we use to distract our kids because
Yeah.
we need that sometimes,
No,
right?
it's true. Just to have a break.
Unreal how they did it. They just like white knuckled it. It's like, okay, we're getting through this. We're doing
Yeah.
this. Like,
Yeah.
how did you
And
do that?
I also do feel like that maybe affected the way I thought about how many kids I want was I wanted to have the mental bandwidth
Oh yeah.
for my kids.
Hmm.
And I feel like having that amount of kids kind of takes your
It
sanity.
does. It does. It really does. It's unreal.
And so like I want to be there and present and ready to handle whatever my kids throw at me in life.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I need to have less kids just to
To
be
be
able
able to
to
manage that.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they did it, but they did it, and we all turned out somewhat okay. I think
Right.
we're all visiting some therapists, but like
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
too damaging, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
I went to therapy yesterday, and we were talking about how each generation is a better version of their parents.
Oh, okay.
So, like, for example, like, my parents, I would categorize them, as strict parents,
Okay.
but they are a softer version of their parents.
Their
So
parents were a
my
lot more
grandparents were a
intense.
lot more intense, a lot more strict, and so my parents were a softer version. So they were strict and they were, yeah, just they were amazing parents, but they had like high expectations of us. And
Hmm.
so Gustav and I feel like are softer versions of our own parents,
Hmm.
we're a little softer and a little less strict. We still are strict, but not the
Not as,
extent as our,
yeah,
our parents,
as your parents.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that too is like you almost get different parents in different stages of your life.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my older sister versus my younger sister, obviously they're the same parents. There's some similarities, but their
Hmm.
parenting style grew from having their first to the very last. And so
Right.
I'm sure your parents, the way that they parented you as an 8 year old, was so different compared to your
Yeah.
sister who was a lot
Completely different.
older than you.
Like
So
my sister or my siblings always tell me like you got different parents than we had growing up. Especially cuz my dad
yeah.
was pretty much retired. He was very very present in my life growing up and they didn't have that. He was
Oh
gone the
wow.
majority of their childhood. He traveled to China for work like
So he's
almost
just gone.
every few weeks.
Oh my
So he was
gosh.
gone a lot. So my dad and I have a really really close relationship
Yeah.
whereas they didn't. And so, I mean, I'm lucky that I was able to have that. And I feel like that helped my marriage and seeing my worth.
Hmm.
Just because I had a dad who, which like, he verbally would tell me, like, I love you so much. Like,
You heard that a lot.
yeah, I heard
Yes.
that a lot because he was there and present. Whereas I don't know if my siblings got that as much just because he was gone so much.
Hmm. That's so interesting to think about.
I
Now,
know.
your kids, now that you have two kids, that they'll probably get more similar, a more similar parent, right? Because
Yeah.
the age gap isn't so much, and there's not as many kids, and
Yeah.
so it's again exactly what you're saying. Not that their situation was bad or good,
Yeah.
right?
It was just
It
different.
was just a different situation. And now you guys are taking that. It's like we're just becoming a different version of that version.
Yeah. I feel like that's what helps you grow the most is becoming a parent because you realize this is what I want my kids to experience in their childhood with me as their parent. And
Yeah,
then you kind of like readjust as time goes on to see how you can become better parents for them.
yeah,
And you kind of have to parent each child differently also,
yes,
just
yeah.
because they're different kids.
Very different personalities,
Yes.
very different outlooks,
Like
and
you
how
know
they
that you have
see.
three girls with completely different
It's all
personalities.
so
It's a
different.
spectrum.
It really is. It really is. I see a little bit of me. I see a little bit of Heather. I see some. I don't even know who sometimes. Just
Yeah.
crazy.
Just their own person.
Yeah, I love it so
I
much.
know, it's so fun.
So one thing I did want to talk to you about, if you are okay sharing it, is since we're on the topic of kids, your birth experience and maybe your pregnancy experience
Mhm.
with, if you want to talk about Lily's, but also Ada's,
Yeah.
if you want to share that.
Yes. Let's dive into it.
Okay, let's do it.
I feel like so I'll start with Lily just because that's a pivotal moment is becoming a parent.
Yeah,
I kind of touched on how different it was going from 0 to 1 kid.
yeah,
And I feel like my pregnancy with her was really hard and mentally taxing just because it was physically a lot
yeah.
and I dealt with a lot. And her birth was so cool and so special. She came really fast. She From the time I got to the hospital to she was born was 3 hours, so she came really quick.
Wow, that's fast.
And
No complications, just
n- no complication, like no major complications.
major complications.
Um, just normal birth things. But I feel like it was very empowering and it was an unplanned natural birth just because it happened so
Oh, they didn't
fast.
even have time to give you the epidural and
No,
stuff.
I got the epidural, but it takes, I think they said like 45 minutes to an hour for the like medicine to kick in. So by the time I was pushing, or it
So it
wasn't
has.
even kicked in.
Oh my gosh.
So then,
Well,
like,
tell me about that. How was that? Were you scared because like, hey, I can still feel everything. What's going on? Like,
well, I was like in fight or flight mode of what, in the sense where it was just like, I got to get this done no matter what.
yeah,
So
it's
just
happening.
grit, power and grit.
Oh man. Yeah.
So yeah, it was really cool because it wasn't my plan, but seeing I was able to do it encouraged me to like fully go natural for my second one.
That was a on purpose
Yeah,
decision, I
yeah.
guess you could
So
say.
with my second baby, I was just like, I've pretty much done this. I'm just gonna do it again,
Oh
full force,
man.
by choice.
Yeah.
And so with Ada, she came almost just as fast. Um, and her labor was the most empowering and most special thing I've ever done in my life.
Tell me about that.
Just because Gustav was the best partner. Like I feel lucky to be able to like share this whole experience because it just brought me so close to him because he was the best partner through my labor because I think it was like 2 hours longer. So it was like by the time I got in to when she was born was 5 hours.
Okay.
So it was a little bit longer, but still really short.
Hmm.
And with Lily, my water broke quickly, so she came out quickly. Whereas this one, my water didn't break as fast. And so it took longer, but as soon as my water broke, she was out.
Hmm.
So through that whole process of my labor, Gustav was just like helping me stay honed in, like with a strong mind and being able to breathe. Like he literally would count for me, like one, two,
Going through
but
the
like
breathing
breathing because
exercises with
when
you.
you're in that pain, you just can't think of anything. It's almost
No.
like you're in so much shock that someone has to be like, okay, you're gonna take a breath and you're gonna breathe out and
Hmm.
you're gonna move to the side. You just have to be told exactly what to do because you're just like, what is happening?
There's so much going on.
What do I do? Like you feel scared, but also strong.
Yeah.
And it was just such a cool experience because I was able to see my strength of like my mental strength. I was able to
Hmm.
tell myself every single contraction, like, you're strong, you're capable, you can do this.
It's amazing.
So it helps me realize how strong and capable I am when I'm focused, you
And what
know?
you're able to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah. This is where I moved into Provo.
Oh, this is it right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
My exact room was on this corner. The second one in on the top.
Wow.
That's where I
That's
moved.
cool. Now
Isn't that
you're
fun?
just
I know
living it
now
out
I'm
here.
literally right there.
Wow, how cool is that?
I know. So
We're
Provo's
just
my
going
home.
full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay,
her birth was amazing.
that's amazing. So okay, so natural birth. I cannot relate. I'm just gonna say that outright.
It was
I can't relate. I don't know how it
insane.
feels. It would terrify me to have to go through something like that. And I talked to Heather about this, but it's like you're laying down there, and the baby's coming, and this is terrifying. The only way out is for this baby to get out. Like there's nothing I can do. I have
Yeah.
to just do it,
Yeah.
right? And the fact that you did that naturally with no
It was
epidural or
so
anything,
cool.
the second time around, I mean, the first time you felt how that felt. Second time around, did that make you any more nervous, or did it empower you even more? Like I've done, I know how this
I
feels. I got this.
I feel like the first one was so scary because I didn't know what was happening, but it was empowering that I could do it.
Yeah.
Um and the second time I kind of knew what I was getting into, so I was a lot more calm, and I feel like relaxing your body and keeping calm, they say it's less painful. Like if you're like or if you're in a
Like really
contraction,
flexing
like
and stuff.
yeah, and you're so tense, it's not gonna let the baby come out as smoothly. So literally, Gustav would be like, "Hey, relax your body, take a deep breath," and so I was able to like fully
Oh
be
man.
Jello in a
Yeah.
sense, where I'd like be like, "Hey, I am Jello," just flop.
And yeah, just dead weight.
Yeah,
It's
and
one.
so it's so different, so
Yeah.
different.
It really. It's one thing being told what to do and just like trying to process all that, and then it's
Yeah.
another thing when you actually do process it. And it sounds like that you did. Like Gustav was basically help like coaching you through
Oh
this,
yeah.
like reminders and hey,
Yeah.
don't forget to do this,
And he was
breathe,
just
let's do
right
that.
next to me the whole time. And so my doctor had to break my water both times just because my water sac is so thick. So
Oh,
he had to pop it for me. So
okay.
when Ada was coming, he came in and broke my water and then walked out of the room. This is the craziest part of the story.
Okay.
Have you even heard any part of this
I've
story?
no.
Okay,
I've been waiting
so
for this.
he came in, he broke my water, walked out, and because I didn't have the epidural, I was able to move more.
You can feel your
You can
legs
you
and
can
move
roll
around.
over, you can like
Yeah,
bounce on a ball or stretch when you need to.
yeah,
So he popped my water, he walked out. I rolled over because my back was in so much pain just from the pressure.
yeah.
And so she was actually like sunny side. So I think it's her face was like facing upwards to my belly
Is
button.
that good or bad?
That's the opposite way
It's
that
supposed
you
to be
want.
down.
Yeah,
Okay.
you want her to be looking down when she comes
Okay.
out. So I had to roll over because my back was hurting, which meant that she was facing the wrong way. So
Oof.
I rolled over, and the nurses were kind of like helping me naturally flip her just by gravity. Like when you move, they move.
Yeah.
And so I could feel her flip over. She was in the right position, and immediately it was like he broke my water, stepped out. Immediately she flipped and started coming out.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
She's like, it's time to go. Time to
no,
go. It's like, what?
seriously. And so Gustav was like
Oh no.
standing right next to me, and I was like, she's coming out. Like she's fully coming out, and my doctor's not here. And the nurses were kind of getting frazzled, and Gustav was that calm presence that I needed. He's like, it's okay. You're safe. The baby can come out when it needs to.
Yeah.
Like if you need to push, you could push, And the nurses like saw his calm energy, and immediately like it switched to flipping them. They
Oh
were
wow.
calm, and they're like, okay, what do you need to do? Do you need to roll over? Do you need to push? Like, what do you need to do? And I was like, no, she's fully coming out on her own. I'm not even pushing her
Like
out.
you were
She's coming
feeling it.
out.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
if I could feel her coming out. And so I was just like, she's coming out.
She's
Where's
coming.
the doctor? So they literally were hollering down the hall. They're like, Dr. Harward, like, where are you? Where's the doctor?
Yeah.
And so finally someone finds him. He was just like down the hall, but she was coming out already. And so they
Like
were
was she like she was
scrambling.
actually coming out like
She was like,
Gustav
her
could see
head
her
was
and stuff?
coming. Yeah, Gustav
Oh
was
my
like, okay, she's
gosh.
coming out. Like, either find the doctor or catch this baby, in a sense.
Yeah.
And so I was on my
Oh
side,
no.
so he's holding my leg up, and the doctor comes in. He's like, why didn't you call for me? And we're like, we were
Yeah.
shouting for you.
Yeah.
And so I literally, he was like, the doctor was like, okay, you need to flip on your back. It's the safest position. I rolled over, I pushed twice, and she was out.
Twice and she was out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because she was just like hanging out there, and I was trying not to push because I didn't have a
Ready
doctor to
go.
catch this baby.
Oh my
I know
gosh.
Gustav probably would have caught her if he had to, but it
Yeah.
was just the
That would
craziest
be
moment of like, this baby's coming out and I don't have a doctor.
yeah. Where is this guy? He just went down
And
to
the
go get a
nurses were
cookie.
hollering down the hall, so they weren't even in the room.
So it's
It
you
was
and Gustav's like, got this. Let's
Gustav
do
was like,
this.
if you need to push, just push. I was
He
like,
was
okay.
he
He
was
was
so
a
ready
rock.
to get this
Yeah.
baby.
He was amazing.
So
It was so cool.
okay, where did this come from? I know he's a very stoic guy, and I can see how
Yeah.
like where the calmness comes from. Was he reading something before, like how to
We
prepare for a baby, or like where did this come from?
we talked about it a lot just because my first labor was so fast. We were nervous that we were gonna have home birth unintentionally.
It was just
So
wow,
we literally like looked at videos on YouTube of how to how to
smart.
deliver a baby just
Yeah.
in case, because my sister that was in our house before us, the one that we bought the house from, she had her last baby in the bathtub unintentionally, like in
So
the
your
middle of the
sisters
night.
too? Did the babies just come out
Yeah,
fast?
yeah. So like it was something that we knew could happen, that we were trying to prepare for in case it did. But we talked a lot about what I expected in my labor and what I needed. Like I needed him to be calm and help me stay relaxed, because I feel like going into a natural labor, you have to have the headspace where you can calm yourself
Yeah.
and not see it as a scary thing, because it is scary, but you're in a safe environment.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
can
like
do it.
you're capable.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it a lot, and I think that prepared him going into it, knowing he needed to stay calm, he needed to be my rock, he needed to help me breathe through it. But I
Really
feel like,
preparation.
yeah, I feel like the preparation and also where relationship was at also determined a lot of how the labor went, just because we were in, we still are, but we were in a great relationship where we could talk about anything. We were really close, and that helped have the strength as a unit to get through something hard like that.
Yeah. It's just a
So,
testament of what you
yeah,
guys are is a testament of what you can accomplish, right?
yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
And like you said, he's like a very stoic, like intense person, but
Yeah, it
I
could be
feel like
intense. Yeah.
with me, he's the most
He has a
caring
soft
and,
side.
yeah,
Yeah.
and protective. He has that characteristic where he can hone it in and use it for like, okay, everything's fine, we're safe.
Yeah.
He's like the rock in the family.
Yeah, because the last thing you want is somebody freaking out like,
They'll be
"Oh
like,
my
okay, okay,
gosh."
what are we gonna do? The baby's coming
and,
out, you know.
and no fault to like people who pass out, but have you seen those videos of the dads who
Yeah.
just drop?
The nurse are like fanning him, and the
Yeah.
mom's just like,
It's
how
like,
are you doing
what,
with the baby in her arms?
those are so funny. I mean, I didn't think I was gonna. I'm not like that. That didn't happen to me. I watched all my kids' births, and
So
I find
cool.
it super interesting.
It's
Yeah,
so cool.
I think it's very special experience to be in the same room with somebody, with your spouse,
Yeah,
and they're just delivering a baby. Again, it's hard for me to imagine to really feel how that feels like, and I
right.
never will. But to be part of that experience is something very special.
Yeah, and it's empowering as a family
Yeah, it is.
because it's just like, okay, we're going through this together, even though your wife is doing like the hard work. It's
Yeah,
like you're
right.
there for her and you're doing it together as a family,
Yes.
introducing a tiny little baby. It's
Yes.
so fun.
And how did Lily react to the new baby? Was she all for it? She's the most
Yeah, she
awesome. She's so awesome.
even when so I'll go back to the minute I found out I was pregnant. I found out through Lily because
Really?
one day I was just getting her out of her crib and she like literally kissed my belly and she's like, "It's a baby." And so I
What?
took a pregnancy test and it was positive, even though
And she'd never done that before.
no, she had never
Oh
done
my
that before.
goodness.
And so it was just like, oh, okay. And I
Wait,
took a
what
pregnancy test and it was
did that
positive.
prompt you to take a pregnancy test, or
Yeah.
was it like, oh, that was
No, I was just like, well, we'll see if she's right. And she was
and
right.
she was right.
And then she started saying,
Wow.
like, my baby sister, and it was a girl.
So she called
And
it from the very beginning.
yeah. And so she has had a huge role,
Oh.
even from like literally day one, that she just she told me that I was pregnant, told me it was a girl, and she named her because we went to an ultrasound with her, and she was like, "Oh, the baby's a tiny dot, like it's baby Dottie."
Oh, so she came up with that
Yeah,
nickname. Wow, it
so she
really
named
has
her
been her
sister. Yeah,
this whole time.
yeah. So we obviously named her Ada,
Precious.
but her nickname is Dottie just because Lily, throughout my whole pregnancy, called her baby
Dottie.
Dottie.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, that's so precious.
yeah. So she adjusted so well to the baby coming home. I feel like this is the part we can kind of go into is when Ada was 9 days old, we had to take her to the ER and I was gone for a week in the hospital.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest moment of Lily was confused on what was happening. And that was the hardest moment of like, why is my mom gone? Why is the baby gone? And when we got home, she was kind of like resentful towards me and the baby just because in a
You
sense
felt
we
that.
kind of abandoned her,
Yeah.
not on purpose but because we had to take care of a baby that was not
Right.
doing well, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the hardest moment in our family is when we came home from the hospital the second time with Ada because she was just like, what is going on?
Just really struggled with,
Yeah.
and she's so young, she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
understand everything, right?
Right.
Do you want to share a little bit about what
Yeah.
happened at 9 days old?
Yes. So obviously we got home from the hospital. I think we stayed in the hospital for like 48 hours after I had the baby. So on day 3 we got home and we were just adjusting to being a family of 4
Mm-hmm.
and having 2 kids. And so we were home for a few days and we were just having a normal day and I noticed some changes with Ada. Like it was a Wednesday and we were just going through a normal day and I at 11 o'clock she was kind of spitting up but in a more
Not the
violent
normal way,
way.
huh?
Yeah, it wasn't just like she just spit up. It was just like just kind of making a throw up noise. So I called in to the nurse line and I was like, "Is this normal?" They're like, "Yeah, totally normal." But like my mom intuition was just like something's
Up.
off. But other than that, she was completely acting like herself. Like she was still awake and alert and she was a little more sleepy, but babies are sleepy and she
Mm-hmm.
had jaundice, so she was sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the day went on, I was just feeling really anxious, just postpartum anxiety. And then it just kept getting worse, kept getting worse. So my sister was there just visiting the baby and hanging out with us. And I was just like, I need to go take a nap. Like, I'm feeling so much anxiety. And so I went to lay down, and we had an outlet sock that we put on the baby, usually just at night. But this was at like 3 o'clock. I was just like, I need to take a nap. Put the sock on her,
Which wasn't normal, you're
which is
saying.
not normal. No, I
Okay.
usually put it on at like 10:30 before we go to bed. I put
Uh-huh.
it on and we go to bed, you know.
Right.
And I just had like this feeling I need to put on the sock And so I put it on her little foot and I laid down, and immediately the alarm started going off. And I was like, this is the first time the alarm's gone off. Like maybe the sock's not adjusted right. But I checked my app and her heart rate was at 288.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I was just like, at this time, I didn't know what was going on. So I just called the nurse line and I was like, hey, this is what's happening. Like, the alarm is going off on my outlet it's saying it's 288. Like, what do I do? Is that right? And so,
288. That is
mhm,
so high.
I know. And I was like, this can't be normal. Like, it can't be right because
Hmm.
that's not
Yeah.
a normal heart rate. Like,
Yeah.
something must be malfunctioning. And so I kind of started to panic a little bit, but I was still like calm at this point.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so the nurse was like, check her pulse in her, like inner, like her bicep, like her inner arm.
Uh,
Is it racing? And I said, yeah, it's racing. And they're like, okay, you need to go in the ER right now. And so I told Gustav, and luckily my sister was there because then Gustav and I were able to go together to the ER,
so
and
she could
Lily
stay
was
with
able to
Lily.
stay with my sister and her cousin. And so she was happy and taken care of. And so we went to the ER. And this at this point, when I got into the ER, I was like kind of feeling the weight of things and I was feeling panicked, you know. So I got in and they were like, what's going on? And I was immediately just like started crying because it was kicking in of like,
Mm.
okay, my baby's not okay. And so they were like, what's going on? I was like, her heart rate is racing. We don't know what's going on. And so they get all this frantic movement of all the nurses come, they grab her, they check her heart rate, they use the what is it called,
Stethoscope.
stethoscope, yeah, to listen to her heart, and it was going so fast that they couldn't count it.
That fast?
Yeah, and so they didn't even count how fast her heart rate was going. They took her in immediately, and they got the doctor in immediately. Like everyone was, it was
They're
starting to
just so
feel real because
busy.
it was frantic, you know.
Yeah.
And so the ER doctor gets in. He's very calm, which I'm so grateful for. But he was just telling us, walking us through, okay, it looks like your baby is in SVT. And so
What's
we
SVT?
didn't know what that was. And so we are just like, what is going on? And he kind of described, he's like, your baby's heart rate is going faster than it should be. There's a reason for this, but we don't know what it is yet. And so we were just like, okay, just parents of this tiny, tiny baby. She was 9 days
9 days
old.
old. So small.
Yeah, so tiny. And they have this little like incubator that they put her on and are trying to figure out what to do. The doctor was like, hey, we're going to do something called a cardioversion. And what that is they fill like a Ziploc bag with ice and water and they suffocate them. So they cover
What?
her face and they hold it there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
And you're watching this,
and we're
just you're
watching this
standing
like, what's going on? And they're like, okay, that didn't work. We're gonna try it again in a minute and see if it works. And so they do it a second time and it didn't work. And so they're like, okay, this is getting more serious. We have to administer some medication.
there. Uh-huh.
And so they give her the first round of medication that they have to give her the medication and flush it out like right back to back. So it
Weird.
stops her heart and then they flush it so it gets started again.
Like a reset.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So they do it the first time, it doesn't work. They do it the second time and it doesn't work. They do it a third time and it doesn't work. And this is all within, like, it's probably been an hour since we've been in
And
the
they're just
ER.
going, just trying
They're just
different
trying to do
things.
it different things and nothing's working. And so at this point, Gustav and I are like looking at each other like, we might be losing this baby.
That there
Like,
was a point that you
there
guys
was a
thought
point,
that.
yeah, oh yeah. Like, you could feel it in the room. You
Oh,
could feel it with the nurses, and they got the NICU team down from like the other part of the hospital, and they came down and it was like you could feel the seriousness and the heaviness of this, of like, this is not normal, this is not good, like she's not doing well. And so they kind of make a plan, they group together and they're making a plan of like, what do we do next, because we've done what we could, that's safe. Obviously it's intense, but it's safe. And they're getting desperate enough to this point. They're like, okay, we're going to shock her. We're going to put the pads on her front and her back, and we're going to shock her.
on that tiny little body.
Tiny, tiny body. And they couldn't find any like baby size pads because they don't do this to babies, you know? And so they have these adult size pads on her front and her back, like literally covering her
Her
whole
whole body.
torso.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And they were like, do you want to stay in? And we were like, yeah, we want to stay in. And Gustav watched because he felt like he needed to feel that pain with her, whereas I just wanted to be there with her to support her,
Be
but
present,
I
huh?
couldn't watch because like this was an intense thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so they shock her and they look at the screen and it doesn't change. Her heart rate is still racing. And so again, at this point, we're just like, this
What is
baby's probably
happening?
going to pass, you know, like
Yeah.
our tiny, tiny baby is
Oh,
not getting out of this.
that's such a heavy
I
feeling.
know, and it was so like it just makes your heart sink even just thinking about the feeling, you know. But it's just like being in that moment. You're just like, I have to come to terms that my baby could pass away within the next few minutes. And so,
Was anyone telling you this, like, almost, like, prepping you, like, "Hey."
no, they were so focused on her. They were walking us through what the steps were, but they weren't saying like this could be a possibility. You could
Okay.
just feel it because they were so focused on her. They were just focusing on like, okay, this is what we're doing now. This is what we're going to do next. You
Mhm.
know, just having that
Yeah.
focus on the baby, which is exactly where their focus should be.
Yeah.
And so they kind of regroup again, and the NICU doctors were like, we don't like this. Like, we can't
Oh
shock her
gosh.
again. But again, they're so desperate they don't know what to do. So they decide to up the voltage. So now it's at 4 joules and they decide to shock her again.
Just
And
got
so,
chills, that's
yeah. And so as parents, we're like, okay, like in our heads, we were just like, in my head at least, I was just screaming at God. I was just like, save my baby.
yes.
Like, there's nothing I can do. This is in your hands. Just save my baby. You know, just so intense. It was just so overwhelming. And so Gustav and I were just like hugging each other, and I was just like nuzzled in his shoulder just because I couldn't watch because the first time they shocked her, you could just hear her like, like,
Her body just reacting to
yeah.
the shock, right?
And so they shock her the second time at 4 joules, and it's just silence. Like you could hear a pin drop. All the doctors, all the nurses, it was just utter silence. And we were just like waiting to hear something. And then we hear the ER doctor like, okay,
Take a sigh of relief,
yeah,
kind of?
yeah.
Oh,
He's like,
man.
okay, it's on the screen. Her heart stopped for a second and it's normalizing.
Oh
But
my gosh.
it wasn't showing on her like stats, like where the blood pressure and stats are.
Uh-huh.
It was only on the screen where they could see her heartbeat. It was starting to stabilize. And so they got her out of the SVT, and immediately it was just like all these frazzled movements of, okay, we have to get her to the children's hospital. We have to establish like what we're gonna do next, you know. So that was the craziest part of this whole story.
Oh my gosh, I
I
feel like I was
know.
holding my breath
I
this
know. It's
whole
like you're
time.
like so tense, like, hey, is she okay?
Oh, man.
So yeah, she was fine after that, and we went to the hospital in Lehigh, the children's hospital. She had one more episode of like the irregular rhythms. So then we were transferred again the following day to the Salt Lake Hospital, the children's hospital there.
Swinging from Provo to Lehigh to Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Oh my
So we
gosh.
had to take 2 Life Flight ambulances.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And we
Wow.
eventually ended up in Salt Lake, and it was a lot of movement and a lot of confusion trying to figure out what was wrong with her. But eventually she was stable. She got on a medication called propranolol,
Uh-huh.
which essentially is a beta blocker. So it keeps her from going into those abnormal rhythms. So she was on that. And once we got to the hospital, she stabilized once she was on the medication.
Uh-huh.
And she was fine. And we were like, okay, we've got this under control. She's good now. And we were seeing specialists in Salt Lake. And we saw this one specialist that kind of described what was going on of it could be this or this. Like it could be serious or not serious.
Like for
And
her, moving forward, like the what
for
she
her
has.
heart, specifically for her
Okay.
heart. So they were like, it could be one of two things. It could be just an electric pathway that shouldn't be there. It's just an extra electric pathway in her heart. Or it could be something more serious where her heart could be pumping from the bottom chambers up to the top chambers.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much your heart, like, the heartbeat goes boom, boom. So
Mm-hmm.
the top chamber squeezes, fills the bottom, then the bottom
Bottom.
squeezes.
Mm-hmm.
So in her case, it could have been the bottom was squeezing, filling the top was squeezing, which is the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was more serious. And so we were in the hospital just seeing if she was stable. We were there for 5 days. And on our way out, they were like, we don't have a conclusion of what this could be. We don't know what it is yet, but she's stable, so she can go home.
Hmm.
And so they take one last EKG and they give us a diagnosis, like on our way out of the hospital.
Okay.
And so they're like, what we believe it is called WPW, which is Wolf Parkinson White. And
Wolf Parkinson White.
yeah, and so that is the extra electric pathway, which is the less serious of the
Okay,
two.
so that was confirmed then.
It wasn't confirmed, but it was like, this is most likely what
Oh,
it
okay,
is.
okay.
And so we went home with that. We went home with her on medication, and we now know a lot more of what happened and what it's going to look like going forward. She's completely stable now, and she's still on medication 3 times a day, which that is the hardest part, but knowing she's fine, it's like you'd rather have your kid on medication knowing she's fine,
For
you know?
sure. Yeah.
So with her diagnosis, they said like I said, it's an electric pathway that is not normally there in the heart, like with a normal person.
Hmm.
And it can be either, it could be two things. She could just completely grow out of it,
Okay.
or she has an ablation when she turns like 8 years old.
A
And
what?
an ablation.
What's
So they
that?
go in through a vein in her hip, and they kind of snake it up to her heart, and they pretty much like cauterize, like zap the electric pathway that's
To make
happening.
sure it's working properly.
No,
Just
they zap it so that doesn't
oh,
happen.
so it
They burn
doesn't
it
happen.
off. Yeah, so it
Oh
doesn't
wow.
happen anymore. So that like extra electric pathway doesn't
It just
happen.
stops.
And
Wow.
that's minimally invasive, and it's an easy procedure. Like they go home that same day,
Oh
or
wow.
they're observed overnight, depending on the case. Like if they're little. And so we've been seeing like cardiologists, and everything's been smooth so far. And the cardiologist said that by her first birthday, we'll take her off of the medication and
Okay.
see if that irregular rhythm happens again. And if it does, then
You're looking
she
at
gets
having that
back on,
oh,
and
okay.
then she'll have the procedure later on. But he said that 2/3 of kids with this WPW, if they're an infant when they're diagnosed, by age 1, 2/3 of kids grow out of it. It doesn't happen ever again on
Wow.
its
Okay,
own.
that's good news.
Yeah.
And no rush, by
So
the way. I'm just
no, you're fine. And so we're just gonna see what happens. But
oh
she's
my
completely
gosh.
stable and happy and healthy, and we're seeing cardiologists. Like she's, I know.
What? Never in a million years did you ever think that was gonna
No.
happen.
And it was just like my mother's intuition told me, you need to go in. Like I was feeling this anxiety, and I feel like in a sense it helps my relationship with God just to see him, in a sense, giving me this anxiety so that I would go take a nap and put this sock on her foot.
Yes. Oh
And
man, that could have turned out so different.
yeah, when we were in the ER, the nurses were like, when we see this in babies, most of the time the parents don't catch it until the children are in heart failure, which means they're
Oh
dying
my gosh.
and they don't make it. And so they're like, the whole time we were in the hospital and the ER, pretty much every nurse and every person we talked to was just like, I cannot believe you caught this.
Just perfect.
Yeah.
It really was just
Yeah, there's
perfect
like, I
timing.
cannot
Couldn't be
believe you
better.
caught this, especially with her symptoms being so subtle. It was just like she was throwing up and acting really tired, and she was looking a little bit pale. Like other than that, she was just completely normal and like a normal baby.
My gosh. So
I
if you didn't
know.
even have there's so many things that could have been like if I didn't have the outlet sock, if I didn't go take a nap, if I didn't
Yeah.
just so many little things that could have gone
Like it literally lined up exactly how
a
it
lot more
needed
different.
to so that we would end up in the ER.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a huge
Yeah.
miracle.
And our
That's
life like has changed in a lot of aspects, not only having like a newborn, but also having a newborn with health challenges.
yeah.
Just giving her medication 3 times a day, waking up in the middle of the night to give her that medication, it's just
It's different,
different.
right? Yeah.
And like we have to check her heart with the stethoscope. I can't even say it,
Stethoscope, yeah.
stethoscope.
Yeah.
Every single day we have to check her
Oh, you
heartbeat,
guys have to do
and
that?
yeah, once a day.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then carrying it around in my diaper bag.
That's
Like
a new item
it's
that you're
just
not
totally different. Like you never picture your life like this, but once you
yeah.
kind of get the hang of it, you're like, okay, we stretch and grow. We're
Exact
capable of
stretch and grow.
more,
I love that.
and you just figure it out as you go. And it's like we now have 2 kids. We have a baby with a heart
Hmm.
condition, but we're now more capable than we were
Yeah.
a
Bring on
month
a third,
ago.
super
Yeah,
easy, right?
exactly. I know. We were thinking we were done with two, but after she was born, we're like, maybe we should do it one more
Maybe do one more
time.
time.
We'll figure it
Which is
out. We'll see if we
awesome.
want to do it one more time.
That's so this part of the conversation leads me to one question that I ask everybody, and that's if your younger self saw where you are now, how do you think they would react?
I think a lot of it would be shocking because at one point in my life, I was so sick that I would tell my mom, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to have kids. I don't have the energy to even take care of myself.
Wow.
And so just going through like sickness in my own childhood,
Hmm.
I would be completely shocked and also so proud of myself to like
Hmm.
see where I am today and be like, oh my gosh, I was capable more than I ever could have even
Hmm.
imagined.
Yeah.
Like I knew I wanted kids, but I didn't know how I was going to do it because I was so sick.
Hmm. It
And
wasn't even
so,
like a thought in your mind where it's like
yeah.
I could have done this.
And just being able to see myself now, even currently in my thoughts now, I'm always just like, I'm so proud of myself. Like, I'm I'm capable of so much. I'm so strong for my own kids. I am a good wife. It's just like things that you see and you reflect on. And you're like, I'm so proud of where I am now.
Yeah.
That's what you always want to strive for is just being proud of yourself wherever you're
Mhm.
at.
That's amazing. And then that also leads to my next question, my last question for you. If you could go back in time to your younger self at any age, what's one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Okay. What would I give for advice? I think I would tell myself push through the hard times just because when you have that weak mindset, you doubt yourself and you think you're not capable. So I think going back, I would tell myself, like, push through the hard times because you're going to grow from them.
Mhm.
All those hard times are meant for something. Like whether you're going through depression or you're sick, all these different things that could happen in your life. If you just push through them, no matter how hard it is, you're going to grow from that.
Mm. That's
That's
great
advice I'd
advice.
give
That's really good
myself.
advice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, Jayne, thank you. That was an hour. I say this every single time when I'm talking with people, but this time flies when
I
we're just
know.
driving around and
It's so
talking.
cool.
We could spend a whole nother hour because I'm sure there's a whole part of your younger childhood self that I'm sure we didn't even tap into that you have stories on.
That's for episode 2.
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea is
Part 2.
actually, so we're going to revisit this in a year. So I'm just going
Oh,
to drive
cool.
again with everybody, just see how
That's fun.
things are at. So talk about Ada. We can talk about Lily and
Mhm.
how things have gone. Maybe you're pregnant with
Yeah.
your third. Who knows, right?
Who
So,
knows?
anyways, it's a more reflection, right? Just a year
Mhm.
from now, how's life gonna look like?
Yeah,
So,
hopefully Ada will be off her medicine.
yes, yeah, exactly.
We'll
So I think
see.
it'd be awesome to do these
I
kind of
know.
updates. I think it'd be amazing.
That's so fun.
Well, thanks for jumping on.
Thanks
I
for
know
having me.
Gustav probably is. I don't know if he's gonna go to that lunch, but
I'm
either
sure
way,
he is.
thanks for doing this.
Yeah,
This was
that was
awesome.
fun.
This was really cool.
Until next time.
Next time.